get it started. Start over. Unit 7, Lesson 3. A percent is a ratio that compares a number to 100. Thank you, Caleb. Write each ratio as a percent. So this is review. We covered this already, so we're going to be using this skill today. Who can give me the answer to number 2? Can I get a volunteer for number 2? Miles in the back, thank you. 1%, very good. So remember, percent is per 100. It's already got 100 in the denominator. If it's already got 100 in the denominator, those are the easiest ones to rewrite as a percent, right? Okay. Who's got number 3? Can I get a volunteer for number 3? Yes, Timothy. 98%. And how'd you find 98%? You wrote this ratio as an equivalent ratio, which was 98 over 100, and used a factor of 2 to convert and find this equivalent ratio, and then you got 98%. So very good. Does everybody understand how he did that? Okay. Numerator and denominator multiplied by 2, so you can get 100 in the denominator. Okay, so who's got number 4? Can I get a different person to give me number 4? Rudy, yes. 95%. And what was the factor you used to help you get this? Okay, 5. So 19 times 5 gave you 95. 20 times 5 gave you 100 in the denominator. So we have it percent, 95%. Okay, and Oren, could you get the last one, please? 80%? 8%, very good. And what was the factor you used to rewrite this ratio? 4, very good. So multiplying the numerator and the denominator by 4, we have 8 over 100, or 8%. Pretty easy. That's the shortcut. Can we always use that method to rewrite a fraction or a ratio as a percent? No, you can't. In this case, you will if you have a denominator that's a factor of 100. That means, can you multiply this by something, a whole number, to give you 100? Okay? Now, let's move on to the lesson for the day. What you'll learn: to convert between fractions, decimals, and percents greater than 100% or less than 1%. So last week, I had a few classes ask me about, hey, well, what if I have a whole number and not just a decimal number? And so those were good questions. It tells me you're thinking ahead, you're thinking about other situations, and that's good. So if you were the class that asked me that question, I said, hey, we're going to get to that. We're going to get to that today. So we're converting between fractions, decimals, and percents that are more than 100% or less than 1%, okay? I find that most students are pretty good at fractions or decimals or percents that's greater than 100%. This is where I see students making the most mistakes, and you'll see why in a minute, okay? Why learn this? You can get 110% of one day's recommended daily allowance of vitamin C by eating 1/2 of a grapefruit. In a percent, if the number compared to 100 is greater than 100, the percent is greater than 100%. If the number compared to 100 is less than 1%, the percent is less than 1%. You can rewrite these percents as decimals or fractions of a percent. All right, so let me walk you through these two examples first. So if you notice, we have write 110% as a decimal and as a fraction in simplest form. So let me walk you through this. 110%. Okay, if I was to write this as a decimal, do you guys remember if I'm going from a percent to a decimal, what am I doing with my decimal? Do you remember? Abu?
You're moving it to the left. Wait, if you want to make bigger?
No, I want to go from a percent to a decimal.
No, you're moving it to the left 2 times because it's tricky.
That's good. Let me give you guys a trick. He's absolutely correct, because some of you guys know the 2 places part, but you're not sure when I move it left or when I move it right. So now watch. Do you see the percent sign? If I want to make this a decimal, I move the decimal away from the percent. Do you guys understand? So if I have a percent, wherever my decimal is, if I want to make it a decimal and get rid of the percent, here's my trick. I move the decimal away from the percent. Do you guys understand? So I don't have a percent. I don't have a decimal. Where would my decimal be for this percent? Can somebody explain, Fatima? It'd be right here between the 0 and the percent, right? So if I'm going to move it away from the percent, which way am I going to move it? To the left. I'm going to move it away to the left. Got it? So let's go ahead and get this. Do you guys see how I moved it 2 places? Okay. Here we go. That's a little bit better. Okay, so 110%. If the decimal was right here, I would move it 2 places away from the percent, and now it's a decimal. Now, the whole part, that's my 1. The decimal part is the fraction of a whole. Do you guys understand? Now 10, what's the place value of the 0 for 10? What's the place value of 1 right here? Tenths. So what's the place value of the 0? Hundredths. So do you see why I put 10 hundredths? Do you guys see why I did that for the decimal point? Ignore the 1. Do you see why this fraction is 10 hundredths? Do you guys understand that? Okay, Abu.
If it was 11%, would you add a 0 to that?
No, if it was 11%, I'd have 11 here, and it would be 11 in the numerator. Do you understand? It'd be 11 hundredths. Now, 10 hundredths, I can simplify that because the numerator and the denominator I can divide by what? 10. So 10 divided by 10 gave me 1. 100 divided by 10 gave me 10. Caleb.
I did the fraction thing a little bit different. 11 times 10 equals 110, so I just took out the 0, put 11 on top, and it's
Well, if you put 11 on top of what? You put 110 over 100? Is that what you did?
no. 110 is you multiply 10 times 11 equals 110. So then you just take out the 0, put it over 100, then you simplify.
If you're putting 11 over something, you're still getting a mix. You're still getting a proper fraction. You have to convert it. Okay, so we're saying the same thing, but you're going about it a little bit differently. Okay, I'm trying to give like a cookbook method for everybody, and then if you have another method and you understand it and it works and gets you the right answer, then great. All right, but let's try to focus on this method for now before we get creative. All right, so now look, here we have a percent that's greater than 100%. Here's a percent that's less than 1%. Do you guys see how we have a fraction of a percent? Okay, so we're going to write this as a decimal. And again, remember, if I'm writing a percent as a decimal, I'm moving the decimal which way? Away from the percent, so I'm moving it to the left. So this way is away from my percent. So here's what we got. Again, do you see that I moved it 2 places? It was right here between the 0 and 7. To make it a decimal, I moved it away from where the percent was at. I moved it 2 places. And then now I have this decimal number, right? What's the place of 7? Thousands, because it's tens, hundreds, thousands, and so I have 7 over 1,000, 7 thousandths. Now, I promise you're going to see this on the quiz later this week. It's going to be on the unit test. This is the type of problem right here where you have a percent less than 1. This is where a lot of students were struggling last year. So I'm trying to place more emphasis on this. Are we good? Yes?
That's actually the answer to one of the questions for tonight's homework.
Nice. And a lot of times they will do that. You'll see some, or it would be similar. It might be the same exact, it might be 0.6%, right? Right. So there's a lot of similar problems, yes. Now, what I need you guys to do, knock these 2 problems out. Take some time. It shouldn't take you long. Should take you maybe 30 seconds, tops 1 minute. Okay, can I get somebody to share with the class the first problem? 125%. I need it as a decimal and as a fraction. Who can give that to me? Somebody I haven't heard from yet would be nice. Christian.
So I moved the decimal
over 2 times.
Okay, so if you move it over 2 places, what does the percent become as a decimal?
1,2500.
Nice, 1 and 2500ths. Okay, so, and then you wrote that as a fraction, right?
A mixed number, and that equals 1 and 25 over 100.
Nice, very good.
Simplify it to 1 and 1/4.
Nice. So Christian's absolutely correct. He went from 125%, moved it over 2 places. He got 1 and 2500ths. He took the whole number. That became the mixed number portion, the whole number portion of the mixed number. And then you have 25 behind the decimal, right? And the 5 is in the hundreds place, so it's 25 over 100. And then we simplified 25 hundredths, became 1/4, 1 and 1/4. Okay, the book shows a little bit different method than what I have, but I think if you look at my method and look at the book's method, it's just a slightly different way of thinking about it. Okay? All right. Who's got the next problem? Yes, Joshua.
I think the answer is 35 over 10,000.
35 over 10,000 is nice. And did you simplify that?
No.
Okay, it does simplify by a factor. Well, what goes in 35? A 5, right? And if we divided that out, okay, 35 divided by 5 gives us 7, and 10,000 divided by 5 gives us 2,000. Okay? How many of you guys got to this point? You got to 35 10,000s? Listen, on the multiple choice questions, they're going to give that as an answer. You have to be careful. You have to recognize that 35 and 10,000, there's a factor there that can divide both of them, and it was 5. Okay? But if you got to this point, that's pretty good. Now you just got to be careful about simplifying your fractions. Okay? Any questions about this problem? Like I said, this is the one that tends to trip up students. These, pretty easy. These tend to trip students up. Okay. Any questions before I move on? We're good? All right. So a mixed number represents a percentage greater than 100%. Writing mixed numbers as percents. Okay. So we know that the whole number, whatever it is, if it's 1, that represents 100%, right? If it's 2, that's 200%. Here, this one's going to represent 100%, right? Now, I need to rewrite this 7/8 as a decimal so I could write it as a percent. But is the denominator a factor of 100? No, so we got to go old school. Here we go. Divide it out. And then you can verify my work. I got, what is this number? How do we name this number? Who's got this one? Yes, Uche.
0.875.
So when we say a decimal, we say that number first. What is this number? Ignore the decimal.
0.
No, this number right here.
Oh,
That's 875, and then what's the place value of 5? 8 is 10, 7 is 100. What's the place value of 5? Thousands. So I got 875 over 1,000. And do you guys remember earlier, we want to multiply a percent. We multiply by 100. This cancels. I'm just reviewing some methods we discussed earlier. Those cancel. I'm left with a 10 in the bottom. And then I got to move my decimal over 1. Here we go. So rewriting that as a percent, converting it from a decimal to a percent, I got 87 5/10%. Okay? Everybody understands how to rewrite a fraction as a decimal, correct? Okay, yep.
So, could you have done 8 divided by 8, 100 divided by 8, and then you multiplied it by 7?
100 divided by 8. Yep, you could have done it that way.
Okay.
All right, so now let me show you how you're going to combine all this information down below. So you guys see that a mixed number is just the whole number plus the fraction, right? Do you guys see that? So that's why I rewrite it as 1 plus 7/8. And we know that 1 is 100%, and we know from up above 7/8 is 87, and that's a typo. $87, what should be there? 87 point what? 0.5. Okay, so what I need you guys to do is if you take a look down here, I'm going to fix this typo up here. If you take a look at this problem right here, see if you can work that out. And I will fix this. Should be 87.5%. Okay? All right. So what I need you to try and do is this problem down here. This one is pretty easy. You can almost do this one mentally because part of it was in the warm-up, right? Who's got this one? Ola. You got 280%. Walk me through that. We know the 2 is how much? That's 200%. And then we got the 4/5, right? So the 4/5, if we simplify it, what's 4/5 as in if we write that as decimal in the percent? What's 4/5 if we wrote the 4/5, the mixed number portion? 80%. So here we go. This is the part Ola is talking about. Okay? And then Ola is correct. My answer is 280%. So I have the 2, which is 200%. I have the 4/5, which is 80%. So 200% plus 80%, 280%. Any questions? Okay. Moving on then. All right. So a proper fraction represents a percent less than 100%. Application, and this should be relevant to what's going on now, right? West Virginia has 3 members in the House, in the U.S. House of Representatives. There are 432 other representatives who are not from West Virginia. Now, the way they worded this question can be very confusing. All right? So when you set this up, be careful. What percent of the representatives are from West Virginia? So my denominator has to be what?
432.
What is it?
432.
That's what most students are going to say. They're going to trip on that. Okay. So a few of you threw your hands up really quickly. Can you guys explain to me, Fatima, can you explain to me your answer, please?
So it says that there's West Virginia, there's 3 members from West Virginia, and there are 432 that are not.
Okay, let's pause for a second. She brought up the key points here. 3 members from West Virginia, 432 not from West Virginia. So that means altogether we have how many? 435. So do you see how we set that first part up? Do you guys understand how we set that part up? And then, of course, in the numerator, we have the 3 representatives from West Virginia. Now, we're short on time, so I'm just going to walk you through this. How do we convert a fraction to a decimal? Can somebody walk me through that? Timothy, what do we do? What's the first thing we got to do?
Good morning, CPA students and staff. We will begin the process of dismissing 10th grade for their field trip. 10th grade, please listen to your cohort. Do not dismiss until you hear your cohort. Cohort 10-1, you may begin going to the front of the school to load on your bus. 10-1 at this time. Thank you.
Okay.
Also, 10th grade teachers, please make sure that you have your attendance entered before you leave for today. Make sure that you have your homeroom attendance entered for today. Thank you.
Okay, Timothy, go ahead. How do I divide? What am I dividing? How do I set this up? You're converting a fraction to a decimal. What am I dividing? Tell me how to do this. Right, the bottom number, the denominator, 435, is outside of the house, and then the numerator is what?
10-2.
Inside the house.
You are dismissed at this time. 10-2. Only those students going on the field trip. 10-2.
So here it is. I worked it out, and anytime you have too many zeros, that throws students off. okay? Especially for those of you that are still struggling to multiply and divide decimal numbers. So keep track. The 3 is in the house. Notice where the decimal is. Okay, I worked it out here. And then once we work that out, here's what we got. And then notice this. I have to move it how many places?
10-3, you are dismissed at this time. 10-3, you are dismissed at this time.
So to take the decimal to a percent, I have to move it toward where the percent sign is going to be, right? So think about this. I'm trying to give you some tricks. If I want to turn a percent into a decimal, I move it away from the percent sign. If I want to turn a decimal into a percent, I move the decimal toward where the percent sign is going to be. Do you guys understand? So I'm trying to get you guys to have some tricks to remember it so you know what to do. Okay? So I move it 2 places to the right.
10-4, you are dismissed at this time. 10-4, you are dismissed at this time. All 10th grade students who are going on the field trip should be making their way to the front of the school to board your bus at this time.
So you notice where my
Any
decimal's
10th grader
at?
not knowing, please report to Mr. Francis' section of the ILC for the time being. Thank you.
It's here at the 6, and I rounded 6 to 7 because 8 is 5 and up, so I'm going to bump the 6 up. It's 0.7%. Are we good? Okay. Take a look at this now. Idaho has 2 members in the U.S. House of Representatives. What percent of the representatives are from Idaho? So if you tripped up on the last example, that gets resolved. Solve this problem. Work it out. And I'll tell you, this one does, I believe this one does terminate. This is not a repeating decimal, if I recall correctly, but I might be wrong. Okay, set this up, work this one out. Okay, let's walk through this. So what's my fraction going to be? Can somebody share with the class? What's the fraction going to be?
2.
Raise your hand, please. Can I hear from somebody I haven't heard from yet? Tayana, what's the fraction going to be that I set up? What is it? No, not 100. They're talking about the House of Representatives. Logan, can you help her out? For what? 2 over 435, because now we're trying to find the percent of representatives from Idaho. So we need the bottom number to be all the representatives, right? And so we already found the previous problem that was 435. Okay? And so basically we have to do our long division. So I don't know how far you are in your long division, but it says round to the nearest hundredths of a percent. So it looks like this goes on, but we only had to go out tens, hundredths, thousands, 10,000, 100,000s, because we need to know what this 5 is going to be when we rewrite the decimal. So let me go ahead. When I move it over 2 places, that puts it right here in front of the 4. And that would make the 4 the 10th of a percent, and the 5 would be the hundredths of the percent, right? So do you guys understand why I took it out to the 9? Okay. So moving along. Here's the answer when we round when it's rounded and written as a percent. Do you guys see why it's 46 hundredths of a percent? Because the 9 was 5 and up, so we had to bump the 5 up. Okay? If it was 4 and below, we just left the 5 and we let it flow. Okay? Now, any questions about that problem? Everybody understood how to set up the fraction, right? And do you see how it's different than this last problem? You see how they could trick you? All right. Write each percent as a decimal and as a fraction. Can somebody tell me what 150% is as a decimal? Somebody I haven't heard from yet would be nice. Saki, what's 150% as a decimal? Do you remember my trick? If we're writing a percent as a decimal, which way am I moving my decimal? To the left, away from the percent sign. And so where would it be? Nice, between the 1 and 5. And can you tell me what is the fraction that it's going to be? 150 over what? Okay, so hold on. You're good here. Okay, you got this part. The whole number, in the part to the left of the decimal, that's the whole number. That's what goes here. You understand? Now, behind the decimal, I have the number 50, right? And 5 is in the tens place, but I look at the last number, 0. 0 is in what place, Saki? The hundreds. So I put this decimal number on the numerator, and the bottom number is the place value of the digits farthest to the right, in this case 0, so 100. So you see why it's 50 over 100? So it's 1 and 50 hundredths, but we can simplify 50 hundredths, right? Do you see why it's 1 and 1/2? Okay. Can I get a person to help me out with 2/10 of a percent? Who's got that one? Somebody I haven't heard from would be nice. Olamide, tell me what this is going to be as a decimal. Do you remember the trick I just shared with Saki? If I'm making a percent into a decimal, I move the decimal away from the percent sign. So what is it going to be? Yes. 10 hundredths, 2 thousandths. She's correct. Shh. And then, quiet, please. And so, Olamide, do you understand how I got 2 over 1,000? Because 2 is in the thousands place, so I have 2 over 1,000. And you guys know how to simplify the fraction 2 over 1,000, correct? The numerator and the denominator can divide by 2, so I get 1 500ths. Got it? All right. Now, write each decimal or fraction as a percent. So think about this. If I'm rewriting a percent to a decimal, I move the decimal away from the percent sign. If I'm rewriting a decimal as a percent, I'm going to move it toward the percent sign. Do you guys understand? So who can share with the class what this first problem is going to be? What is this written as a percent? Tayana? I need to move it toward where my percent sign is going to be, right? And how many places am I going to move it? 2. So what's it going to be? 825%. Easy, right? Okay. Now this one, I don't have a percent. I got a fraction. Now, because we're short on time, I'm just going to walk you through it. How do I convert a fraction to a percent or to a decimal if the denominator isn't a factor of 100? What am I doing? Fatima? I'm just going to divide. So if we divide this out, here's what we got. Okay? And then I have my decimal. And then to convert a decimal to a percent, I move it toward where the percent sign would be. This is what it is as a percent. Do you guys understand? Okay. So the skill we've been working on so far is going from a decimal to a percent, going back from a percent to a decimal. But the only thing different from what we've been doing so far is now we're dealing with less than 1% or more than 100%. Now, Write 400% as a whole number. Do you guys remember what percent means? Per 100, right? So 400 per 100, well, 400 over 100 is going to be what? 4. Do you see how easy that is? Sometimes I feel like you overthink things, and then you're just like, I'm lost, I don't know what's going on. But it's that easy. 400, that percent sign means per 100 or divided by 100. So 400 divided by 100 gives me 4. Now, compare the numerator and denominator of a fraction that is greater than 100%. If it's greater than 100%, what's going on with the numerator and the denominator? Remember, if it's greater than 100%, we can write it as a mixed number, right? But if we had to write a mixed number as a fraction, what would the fraction be? An improper fraction. And what do we know about an improper fraction when we talk about the numerator and the denominator? A few of you, I saw the light bulbs go off. Who can explain what's going on? Oren? Right, the numerator is going to be greater than the denominator. Okay? So I'm trying to get you guys to see how things are connected here. Do we understand? All right. Now, how can you decide whether a decimal is less than 1%, more than 100%? Give an example for each case. The answers vary here, and I believe some of this is actually in the homework, but here's what the book gave. So I wanted to share that with you just so you guys can see a model for the answer. There's more than one way to explain this. A decimal that is less than 1% has zeros in the tenths and hundredths place, such as this example right here. What is this number right here?
9,000.
Tenths, hundredths, 9,000ths, right? So if I was to move it over 2 places, that would be 0.9%, right? So that's less than 1%. A decimal that is greater than 100% has a number other than 0 before the decimal point. So here's the decimal point, and instead of having a 0 here, it's going to be 1, 2. It could be, if it was 4 in front of the decimal, it would be 4 and 1/100ths, right? So if this number is greater than 0, that means you have a mixed number or you have a percent greater than 100%. Do you guys understand? Okay. So I feel like today's lesson was pretty easy. It's going to be